What's going on, everybody? My name is TJ Jones, and welcome to the first episode of TJ Knows Wrestling Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. On this podcast, we're going to be focusing on some of the greatest wrestlers of all time. We're going to be profiling them and giving you my honest opinion of those particular wrestlers. It is going to be my honest assessment of me watching these wrestlers perform. And maybe sometimes you agree with me, maybe sometimes not, but that's what this show is going to be all about. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. First off, I've been a wrestling fan my entire life. I've been watching wrestling since I was about 4 years old. I'm 34 years old now. So about 30 years I've been watching professional wrestling. I go back as far as WrestleMania 6, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. I'm pretty sure it probably was further down the line because both of my uncles, growing up, they were really close in age with me. So, they used to watch all the NWA, AWA type stuff. And, I remember like the Magnum TAs, Nature Boy, Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen type stuff. But I wanted to do a podcast that focused on a particular wrestler at a time. Everybody has like their Raw reviews, their AEW reviews, and, talk about what's going on in wrestling as a whole. And, I love wrestling, but I just feel like, I don't want to critique it that way. If somebody asks me my opinion about it, of course, I'll give it to you. But I thought it would be easier and fun if I just break down one wrestler at a time. And I thought it would be only fair and only right that the first episode focuses on one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I'm talking about Bret the Hitman Hart, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Right now, I got some stats for you, a couple championships and accomplishments of the Hitman. And we're going to start in WWF. I know that Bret Hart, he started his career in Calgary at Stampede Wrestling that was owned by his father, the late, great Stu Hart. But we all know that Bret Hart became a household name in the World Wrestling Federation, or WWE, depends on how you want to look at it. But Bret Hart, he was a two-time Intercontinental Champion. He was a two-time Tag Team Champion with the Hart Foundation with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. He was a five-time WWF Champion. He was a two-time King of the Ring, 1991, 1993. He also won the Royal Rumble in 1994. He shared that with Lex Luger. He's a two-time Hall of Famer, once as an individual and another time as a member of the Hart Foundation with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. So he was the WWF Superstar of the Year in 1993. He's the second Triple Crown champion of all time. He's a five-time Slammy Award winner. So Bret Hart is an extremely accomplished WWF wrestler. He was also very accomplished when it comes to WCW. I mean, he won the United States Championship and also the WCW Championship after he left WWF. So what is it about Bret Hart? Like I said, Bret Hart comes from a family that is known for, wrestling. His father, Stu Hart, was a wrestler. And, he was the owner and operator of the famous Stu Hart Dungeon that was located in Calgary. And we know that some of the best wrestlers of all time actually came through the dungeon. We know about Chris Jericho. We know about Chris Benoit. We know about Lance Storm, people like that. They all came through the Stu Hart's dungeon. And also, Bret Hart worked with his father's promotion called Stampede Wrestling, which got him his start. He was the Stampede Wrestling champion before he left to come to New York to be a part of the WWF in the early 80s. He tagged up with his brother-in-law, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and they were the Hart Foundation. And they started off as a heel faction, going up against the British Bulldogs. As you all know, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, and Dynamite Kid, they were known as the British Bulldogs, and they used to feud with them. And also the Rockers, young Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. But Bret Hart branched out on his own. He was a guy that Vince McMahon had a lot of hope and belief in. So he made him a single star, and he won the Intercontinental Championship from Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, who was a really good wrestler. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be profiling him down the line. But he won the Intercontinental Championship from Mr. Perfect for the very first time. And we know about the classic match where he dropped off the championship to the British Bulldog, who is also his brother-in-law, in Wembley Stadium when SummerSlam went to the UK. And, Bret Hart was a two-time Intercontinental Champion, and he was doing this thing. He was a guy that was putting on classic matches. One in particular that you can think about was with Shawn Michaels, the famous ladder match. He was the first person to be a part of a ladder match in the World Wrestling Federation, and it's only right that the king of the ladder match, who I like to call Shawn Michaels, was a part of that. But he ended up transitioning. We had these big old steroid cases that were going on in the early 90s that involved Hulk Hogan. We all know about some of those steroid cases, or the guys that, that Vince McMahon had a part of his roster. These guys were accused of using steroids, and Vince McMahon almost went to jail, man. The federal government was coming after him really, really hard. So, Vince McMahon kind of, wanted to get out of that whole steroid light that he was in. So he kind of started focusing on the smaller wrestlers, the Shawn Michaels, the Bret the Hitman Hart, guys that were, probably 225, 230. And Bret Hart, the workhorse that he was, Vince McMahon decided to put the championship on him. Bret Hart won his first WWF title by defeating the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And, the rest was history, man. Bret Hart put on some really good matches. He put on a really good match versus Diesel. He put him on the map. I mentioned earlier, about the British Bulldog. But my favorite match about Bret the Hitman Hart had to be the match that he had with his brother Owen. I think that feud in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, that was probably one of my favorite feuds of all time. We know who Owen Hart is. Owen Hart was the younger brother of Bret the Hitman Hart. But Owen Hart was a little bit jealous of all of the accomplishments that Bret Hart was getting. And Owen Hart was kind of the guy that was kind of flying under the radar. He was tagging with Coco Beware, with high energy. He was a part of the new foundation with Jim Neal, Neidhart, Bret Hart's former partner, and also the Blue Blazer. But he wasn't getting the notoriety and the fame as his brother, Bret the Hitman Hart, winning championships. And there was an opportunity that back in 1994 at the Royal Rumble, Owen Hart had opportunity to become a tag champion with Bret Hart. They were taking on the Quebecers. So they ended up losing the match because Bret Hart refused to tag his brother Owen in because he felt as if, I'm talking Owen, that Bret should have tagged him in because Bret was getting his leg tore up the entire match and he can barely even walk. And, finally, Bret ended up losing the match. And Owen Hart kicked the leg from under his leg. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. He kicked his brother's leg that was injured. And here comes the classic heel turn of Owen Hart. They battle in one of my favorite matches of all time, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. The WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 10, and also the steel cage match at SummerSlam. That was also one of my favorite matches of all time. Bret Hart, he was still a champion. He still was the workhorse champion, traveling all around the world, becoming a household name, carrying WWF on his back. And then finally, around WrestleMania 12, Vince McMahon had another idea, and it involved a younger, up-and-coming superstar by the name of Shawn Michaels. And he wanted Shawn Michaels to be the world champion. And they wrestled this classic Iron Man match that was put together by the late, great Pat Patterson. And they wrestled for about an hour, and it was they wrestled to sudden death. Shawn Michaels beats Bret Hart in sudden death, and he becomes the world champion. And we all know about those feuds between him and Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart did not like each other. They hated each other. They were always throwing shots at one another. If you listen to the guys talk, Bret felt like Shawn didn't take things serious. At this particular time, Shawn wasn't as mature as the Shawn Michaels we see today. He was battling with drugs. He was very egotistical. He was always politicking in the back. And Bret Hart really didn't care for him as far as, the way that he went about his business. And not to mention, he just felt as if Shawn Michaels didn't have an appreciation for some of the things that Bret was trying to do. Bret Hart said, you can take this with a grain of salt. It's all about he said, she said. But Bret Hart said that he's willing to do anything for Shawn Michaels. And, he wants them to work together. Shawn Michaels said, well, I'm glad you feel that way, but I don't feel the same way about you. And that would really fuel things. And they were on a collision course to the classic 1997 Montreal Survivor Series matchup for the World Championship. We all know about Bret the Hitman Hart getting screwed, the classic Montreal screw job, that took place where Bret Hart was under the impression that he was not going to lose the championship at Survivor Series to Shawn Michaels, but instead he ended up losing the championship because Vince McMahon orchestrated something behind the scenes that didn't involve Bret Hart, because he was afraid that Bret the Hitman Hart, who was about to leave WWF to go to WCW, was going to take the belt with him. And it all happened probably because of when Medusa, who was formerly Alundra Blaze, took the WWF Women's Championship and threw it in a trash can on national television. So Vince McMahon didn't want history to possibly repeat itself. So he ended up screwing Bret the Hitman Hart. And this is when, to me, Bret Hart kind of lost himself. He went to WCW, barely had any type of direction. Eric Bischoff has said that, Bret Hart wasn't in it. No pun intended. His heart wasn't into being in WCW. Some of the plans that they had for him, Bret Hart rarely ever said anything about it. He never really, talked to Eric Bischoff about his plans. Bret said that he always had these different ideas and Eric shut him down. I don't know who to believe, but all I know is Bret the Hitman Hart lost a bit of himself, and it all started back in 1997. But before I start talking about WCW, there's a very important part that I missed. The part where he feuded with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13 and the classic, heel face switch. You know what I'm saying? When Bret Hart came into the match, he was the face, but fans were booing Bret Hart at the time because he was always grabbing the mic, talking about how great he was, and people were starting to get sour on Bret the Hitman Hart. And then you had Stone Cold Steve Austin. Even though he carried himself like a classic heel, it was something that was going on in the world of professional wrestling. It was people were starting to like the bad guys. I mean, we seen in WCW when the NWO was there, they were always cheering for those guys, even though they were doing dastardly things. And it was kind of the same thing that was going on with Stone Cold Steve Austin. So they just kind of did the whole flip where Bret went in as the face, left as the heel, and vice versa for Stone Cold, went in as a heel, left as a face. So Bret the Hitman Hart started the new Hart Foundation once again that involved him, his brother Owen, British Bulldog, and Brian Pillman. And also, you can add in Jim the Anvil Neidhart if you want to. He was also a part of the Hart Foundation. And, they were cheered when they went to Canada, but when it came to the United States, they were always getting booed. And it was something that had never been done before and never has been done since, where a guy will actually be cheered and revered in his home country of Canada and get booed in the States. And, Bret the Hitman Hart, he had a really good classic heel run. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So let's go ahead and fast forward to WCW. Once again, Bret Hart was not happy about being there. It really didn't serve, it didn't help the cause that his brother ended up tragically passing away in a tragic accident where he fell from the rafters at Over the Edge pay-per-view. That didn't help also. And then, to top it all off, he ended up having to end his career because Bill Goldberg kicked him in the head, and caused him to have a massive concussion, which later on in the future caused him to have some strokes, and down the line. But here's my overall impression on Bret the Hitman Hart. When Bret the Hitman Hart was a wrestler, he was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I loved myself some Bret the Hitman Hart. There was nothing you can say that will ever change my mind about Bret the Hitman Hart. When I was a kid, I was a card carrying member of the Pink and Black Attack. And I really loved every single match that he was always a part of. I always rooted for Bret the Hitman Hart. He was one of the greatest sellers of all time. So he always did a really good job of making you believe like he was really in trouble. And you always found yourself next to the TV like, come on, Bret. And when he put that patented sharpshooter in and he wins the match, you're cheering, you're jumping all over the place because you wanted him to win so bad. You were so emotionally invested in him. And then as I got older, man, I just realized something about Bret the Hitman Hart. And I just look at him now, and he's like that bitter, old man that just can't let things go. You know, that whole Montreal screw job happened back in 1997. The people that's involved, you look at those guys and you can talk about their career without even talking about the Montreal screw job. I mean, Vince McMahon had the classic Mr. McMahon character, you know, and him feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Also, like some of the feuds that he had down the line. You look at Shawn Michaels, who ended up messing his back up in a match versus The Undertaker, but ended up coming back to the WWF or the WWE and having some classic matches. You know, the classic matches with Triple H, the classic match with, you know, Ric Flair, the classic match with John Cena, you know, had all these different matches, you know, Chris Jericho, and his career has went on. But it's like as if Bret the Hitman Hart's career is stuck right back there in 1997, and he just cannot let things go. And he just comes off as this bitter old man that just would not allow the history to be let go for him to heal and move forward. And every time that you hear Bret the Hitman Hart, he's always elevating himself and always depreciating the guy that he was in the ring with. If anything goes wrong, it was the other person's fault. If the match was a classic, it was because the person listened to him. It is never, ever his fault about anything. He takes absolutely no responsibility for nothing that happened in his career. And that's really unfortunate, man, because it makes you not even want to cheer for this guy anymore. And I feel bad because I loved him so much as a kid, but as an adult, he just comes off to me as a whiner that doesn't want to let things go. And I understand that Bret the Hitman Hart has had tragedies in his life. I get it. You know, I understand that. And I'm not trying to devalue that at all. I mean, the people that have passed away, you know what I'm saying, from the British Bulldog, from Brian Pillman, from Owen Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the list goes on and on. Look, I understand that you have like levels of mental trauma that have happened in your life, but at the same time, it's like every time Bret Hart sits down in an interview, you rarely ever hear people talking about some of his accomplishments. And it's like, if they talk about his accomplishments, I'm going to put this as an example. If you're talking to Bret the Hitman Hart for an hour, he's going to talk about his accomplishments for 15 minutes. And another 45 minutes, he's going to talk about how everybody wronged him, how everything has happened in his career. And, you know, and he starts to bury other people. And it's just sad to watch, man. All these guys are old, 60s and their 70s. These guys have moved on, and Bret the Hitman Hart refuses to do so. But overall, as a wrestler, Bret the Hitman Hart is one of my all-time favorites as a wrestler, but it's unfortunate that he cannot let go of the past, and because of that, he's kind of slid down the ranks as one of my favorite people of all time. It just seems to me that this guy really needs to sit on someone's couch and decompress about some of the things that are going on, because I just feel like when you look at him, man, I mean, Bret Hart, I don't know if he's like close to his 60s or in his 60s, early 60s, but he looks older than that, man. He looks like a guy that constantly worries about stuff. He looks like a guy that's constantly looks like he's paranoid, and I don't like that, man. You know, it's a bad look watching Bret the Hitman Hart these days, man. I hope that he can find some level of peace in his life where he can finally let some of these things go and have some of that happiness that some of these other guys that you see him talking about have in their lives. But I would love to hear from you. What do you all think about Bret the Hitman Hart? Is he one of your favorites of all time? Do you like Bret Hart? Do you not like Bret Hart? I would love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com. Search TJ Knows Wrestling. And also you can follow me on social media on Instagram at State of Saints, the State of Saint, because I'm also the host of the State of the Saints podcast, a sports podcast. So if you like Saints football, if you like football in general, please check that out as well. Much love to you. Until next time, I'm TJ Jones, and this has been the TJ Knows Wrestling Podcast. You all take care.